Welcome to the Radical Audacity Podcast. I'm Tiffany Kane, your host. On this podcast, you are going to meet people that walk their own path, live life on their own terms, let go of other people's rules and expectations and the shoulds in life, and instead live life in their own truth, integrity, and authenticity. This podcast will give you the inspiration you need to live your own radically audacious life. Enjoy the episode. Are you the kind of person that likes things to be fair? Do you ever find coming out of your mouth, that's not fair? Do you like when things are shared equally, when you know that you will be treated equal to the person next to you? No matter the color of your skin, no matter your physical ability, no matter the size of your body, no matter your racial background, no matter your heritage. Is it important to you that you are treated fairly and equally? Yeah, it's important to me too. Did you know in the United States of America in 2023, we as women do not have guaranteed equal rights in the Constitution? That is correct. You heard me correctly. Constitutionally, women do not have equal rights. Not women of color, not any type of woman. We do not have equal rights. And today I am talking to somebody who has been in the battle for equal rights and is a passionate voice for equal rights and getting the Equal Rights Amendment passed in the Constitution. Now, the battle for the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, started 100 years ago. The anniversary is this July. And this woman, Kate Kelly, is an author. She wrote an incredible book called Ordinary Equality, which I highly recommend everybody gets. She is a lawyer, a very acclaimed lawyer that has worked for human rights and equal rights for years. And she currently is working with the White House, with the U.S. government. She is in Congress working with congresswomen on getting the Equal Rights Amendment added to our United States Constitution. I'm not going to go into great detail on the ERA right now. I'm going to do a little mini episode about it where I'm going to talk about some of the history and how it affects us. So listen up for that one. But just know it has been a 100-year battle since the Equal Rights Amendment was first introduced. And here we are 100 years later, and that amendment still is not in our United States Constitution. And Kate Kelly has done incredible work towards this end. She has a podcast called Ordinary Equality. She has, like I said, a book. She is an author, and she is out and vocal and passionate about equality. I know you are going to love the way she is raising the volume of her voice and being heard and making a difference. Enjoy this episode. All right, wonderful listeners. As you heard in the introduction, I am here with Kate Kelly, Kate, I told you when you came on, I'm fangirling quite a bit because the work you do is so important. And you do it in a really fun way. Like it's very engaging. Like I really enjoy following you on social media, reading your book, listening to your podcast. I get, up in arms and energetic about everything, but also feel good about it. You just come across in a really great way where I really enjoy being in your space. So I want to welcome you to the show and I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yay. All right. Can we start with a little bit of your backstory? You and I have some parallels. My listeners know that I was raised in a very patriarchal religion, and many call it a cult. And I got excommunicated from it, disfellowshipped. And you had a very similar story. Would you share some of your background with us in this?
Yeah, of course. So I was raised Mormon. Another word for cult is high demand religion.
Uh-huh.
So that's the PC term. I will say high demand religion. I was raised in a high demand religion called Mormonism. I was born into it. My parents were converts to the church, and a very long story short, I eventually ended up founding a group called Ordained Women to advocate for Mormon women to get the priesthood. In the Mormon church, all men over the age of 12 have the priesthood and no women do. So it's universal, sex segregated priesthood. And we did some amazing things. We did direct actions where we requested entrance to all male meetings. We petitioned the prophet. We did all kinds of demonstrations. And in the end, I was excommunicated from the church, which means I was convicted of apostasy in a trial. I did not attend my trial. They call them euphemistically courts of love. That's what they call them, which is like particularly Orwellian.
Yes.
So yes, I was convicted in a court of love of apostasy. And I appealed my conviction all the way to the top of the church, which is the prophet. But spoiler alert, was unsuccessful in that appeal. And yeah, so I got excommunicated from the Mormon church in 2014.
Okay. The story brings up so many emotions for me because of the parallels. I, as well, was tried by 3 men. I wasn't there. I was interviewed ahead of time. But then the decision was made when I was not there. And I had no appeals process in my church. And it's a fascinating emotional piece to that. Now, mine, I have had a lot longer to heal from. Mine was in the early 90s when I was excommunicated. I was 19 years old. But there's a losing when you're in a religion like that. They are your family. They are your world. They are your community. And then suddenly they're not. You wrote something, if you don't mind me reading a little bit out of your book. So this is the Ordinary Equality book. Those of you listening, you can't see the cover, but I will be posting it on my Instagram. And this is a book you need to get. It's gorgeous. But you talk about somebody else, another prominent woman that got excommunicated. Her name was Sonia. And watching this happen to her, and the idea that she was condemned to their version of spiritual death for advocating for gender equality. And then this passage I'm going to read is what you say after, like your initial reaction to that. You said, in my childhood, that's where the story ended, when Sonia was excommunicated. That was it. Her life, as far as I knew it, was over. Which that right there hits it in a nutshell. Because to this day, I'm still dead to my mother. I'm dead to my sister. That's it, right? When I was young, I prayed to never become so rebellious that I would distance myself from God like she had. Instead, I did everything I was supposed to. I attended Brigham Young University, the Lord's University. I was a Mormon missionary in Spain for 2 years. I married a man in the Mormon temple in Salt Lake City. And then you went to law school. And everything changed. And this, I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit. This is a beautiful read. Everybody needs this book. I hate skipping ahead because you write so beautifully. But you skip ahead. I'm going to skip out a little. It says, at about the same time I figured out that women weren't in the Constitution, I also came to grips with the fact that women weren't equal in my religion. I learned about why the legal doctrine of separate but equal had miserably failed in the United States and why it didn't fly at church either. You talk about founding your Ordained Women And then you say, as a result, I found myself standing in front of the exact same tribunal, the court of love that Sonia Johnson had stood in front of 30 years prior.
Yeah, I don't go into it as much in the book, but it was literally in the exact same building, the exact same congregation, just by pure happenstance. I was living in the same, in Mormonism, it's called stake. So it's the same stake that she was in. And so my trial, some people who attended her trial in the early 1980s had come to mine as well. And they figured out, it's the same parking lot. Like it's the same, they weren't allowed to park in the church parking lot. So they had to park across the street at a different building. It was the whole exact same procedure in the exact same place.
That is insane.
Yeah. I wasn't there, which is also the funniest part is I didn't attend my trial. I chose not to attend for many reasons, including but not limited to I don't pay for my own oppression, it turns out. And I would have had to fly back on my own dime and attend this essentially, proceeding that was meant to punish and perpetrate violence against me.
Mm-hmm. I really want to get into the work you're doing now, but I feel like the psychology of what happened to you is such an important part of the work you're doing now. So I want to take a moment to bridge what you were saying about your oppression and then the work that you do now. And getting into that, being raised as you were in such a patriarchal religion, women are submissive. Like you said, the boys could get priesthood at 12. So a 12-year-old has more authority in the church than you as a grown woman.
Than their mother, than their grandmother, than any woman in their life. So if you go into a room and the patriarch, the dad or the grandpa isn't there, and there is a decision that needs to be made, but there are adult women, they will defer to the priesthood holder, even if he's 12 years old.
Okay. There are so many parallels. I've had this happen in my life. So how does that learning, you can leave, right? You can leave the church, you can leave the organization, start a new life, but that learning is ingrained, right? It's been since infancy, and growing up in that environment, you are completely immersed. If people were not raised in that, they don't understand. But it is truly, it is not a religion. It is truly your way of life. How do you unravel that learning? How do you unlearn that to move on with such passion for what you're doing now for equal rights? That's a lot.
Yeah, oh God, it's so much. And it's ongoing, I will say. It took a lifetime to train me to be the way I was, and it will take a lifetime to unprogram myself from that. So I'm very patient with myself in that, occasionally things pop up or thoughts, or I'm like, Mormonism has a very strict, this is just one example, but Mormonism has a very strict dress code. And even now, sometimes when I see people like wearing a spaghetti strap or like something like that, I think, oh, how dare she? This is not how I think. This is not how I believe. This is not how I dress. But some of these things still pop up in your mind. And I think it's just a lifetime of transitioning out of that conditioning that we had. And I think we have to be patient with ourselves and understand that it may never be complete, and that's okay. We're works in progress, and we're also fighting a really uphill battle. Like if you have not been part of a high demand religion or cult, it is impossible for you to understand what we've been through. I remember I was shopping around a memoir, and one of the editors wrote back and, they decided not to take it. And then one of the sentences stuck out to me, which was, I just don't understand how she could have ever believed this in the first place. And I was like, wow, this is like someone in New York who somehow has never been in touch with any religious person, or certainly no one in a cult, which is ironic because they're everywhere in New York. And, you have Hasidic Judaism, you have, all kinds of things happening. Mormonism is certainly there. So it's a very, very, it's so much more than just a religion that you attend every week on Sunday. It is everything. It is who you are. It is how you think. It is your family. It is your culture. It is your language. It is your brain. It is everything. And so to me, this is how I kind of compare it. You can't just, when people say like, well, if you don't like it here in the United States, why don't you just move to France? And it's like, well, I don't speak French. I don't have a visa. I can't work in France. I don't have any family there. I don't know anything about France. It would be a huge transition for me to just spontaneously up and move to a totally different country. And that is the closest parallel I can think of to leaving your religion of origin, especially if it's a cult. And so, yeah, it takes a lifetime. I think for me, I went through, this sounds very dramatic, but I went through a period of what I call dismantle and rebuild, because every decision I had made, where I went to college, who I married, everything that I had done, where I lived, every decision had been made based on the premise that I was to forever be part of Mormonism. And one day I was, and the next day I wasn't. It was just ripped out from under me. There was no transition period. And so I had to go through a period where I reevaluated every decision I had made and had to decide, is it something I would have chosen on my own because that's who I am, or is it something that I chose because of Mormonism? And that destabilized a lot of choices that I made in my life, including, I remember the day after I was excommunicated, the letter specifically said I was no longer permitted to wear the garments. Mormons wear like a special underwear under their clothing as a religious symbol. And they're very bulky. For women, they go down to their knees. So they're wearing these like white, basically bike shorts that go down to your knees. And it's a full t-shirt essentially underneath. So it's very bulky. And I had to go out and buy regular people underwear. Like I didn't have underwear,
Wow.
And so I remember I went to Nordstrom Rack and was just like looking through the different kinds of underwear that there are. And I had to buy them because I didn't have any. And every single part of my life was like that. I had to figure out what secular people do and how they operate. And, I was an attorney. It wasn't like I was uneducated. And in that, I'm very grateful. And I was very well positioned to leave. I had a career. I was educated. But that does not replace your entire socialization and conditioning. And so that was a very long process, an ongoing process, I would say.
I really appreciate you sharing those details with us. I think I have so much, there's a lot of symbiotic moments. There's so much I can identify with in that. I was 19 when it happened to me. I packed up my little car and moved across the country and just started over because I was like, I can't stay here. I am dead to everybody here. And it was a complete relearning. I probably had 6 months of nightmares every single night as my brain and body were unlearning. But what was really fascinating to me, I wasn't allowed to go to college. And that was one of my big reasons, like my big fights was, but I want to go to college. I want to learn. I remember I took a trip to Sweden and stepped into a library at the Uppsala College. And it was like the moment when Belle goes into the library, the beast shows her the library and it's floor to ceiling and the lights are shining. And it was like this magical moment. And I remember walking that library and it's 3 or 4, or 12 stories, I don't know, books all around and students with books piled on the desk. I felt like I was in a movie. And I remember thinking, I did not know there was this much knowledge in the world. There is so much I don't know. And just that that was the moment for me. That was the paradigm shift. All of the questions I'd been asking my whole life that I was told was so bad for asking those questions, it was suddenly like, well, this is why I'm asking questions, because I don't know anything. And I came home from that trip, and that was the beginning of the end as far as staying in the religion. But just being raised with the thought that you have everything you need in this neat little book and in these people telling you what to believe to then go out into the world and have to find your way. You almost can't explain what a shift that is.
And I think for a lot of people, they're like, oh, that's so liberating. That's so freeing. Like, how exciting, buying your own panties for the first time, or, doing all these different things. And yes, that is part of it for sure. It's very liberating, but it's also a huge loss.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people go through grief and mourning, and you have to give people space to go through that transition. And one of the things you lose is certainty.
Yes.
And that's not like, there are so many times when I'm like, oh my God, I wish I could just like go back and think that I had the answers in a book called the Book of Mormon. And this is the only book I needed to read. And like, I had a distinguished sky daddy who would tell me answers to questions, and I didn't have to make any decisions.
Know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, right? Like, poof, that's it, boom.
And I'm going to heaven. Like, Mormons have super special VIP heaven, and I'm like, I'm going to this like super special VIP heaven. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm going there. Our seats are unlimited. We don't have 144,000, but I do. There's just like such a comfort in that certainty. And I think that's why a lot of people, even though they're smart enough to know these things don't make sense, and that, the historical claims of the Book of Mormon are just like absolutely hogwash. And a lot of other things, point to the fact that this is just not true. They hold on because it's so much easier to just have all the answers.
Yep.
Like, it's so much, that's like fully integrated with your community and your way of life and your, religion and your family. Like, all of that is just so, it's hard to disrupt that. And once you start pulling at the threads, the entire tapestry unravels for many people. That wasn't the case for me. I'm very lucky that my parents, sorry, I'm Mormon, so we cry about everything.
I'm with
but
you.
My parents,
I'm like bright red and emotional. I'm right there with you.
My parents stood up for me, and they never went back. After I was excommunicated, my dad went one time, and they have this thing called fast and testimony meeting, which is just like extemporaneous speaking. Anyone from the audience can come up and speak. And so he went up and bore his testimony, and he said, my daughter has nothing to repent of, and it's the leaders in this church who need to repent. And he walked out, and he never went back. And that's not easy. They live in Utah. Like, all of their neighbors are Mormon. Their mailbox got bashed in. Their neighbors shunned them. They had to leave groups and friendships and all kinds of different things. So they sacrificed a lot and they had sacrificed a lot. They were converts to the church. So they had already made lifelong sacrifices to be part of the church. And that included family relationships that they had ruptured, lots of decisions they had made along the way to be part of Mormonism. So to give that up was huge.
That is beautiful. That love, that's beautiful.
I'm very lucky. And that's not the case for most people. What usually happens is they'll lose those family relationships. In Mormonism, there's not a formal shunning system, but it's very rigid, and the community does definitely distance themselves from the person who they perceive to be an apostate.
Yes, that's the same in the religion I was raised. Okay, I could talk to you about this forever because it is. There's not too many people that understand. Not too many people I've been able to talk to about it. So but I really want to dig into the work you're doing now and the passion for it that you have. My interest in this work started in a college class I had, an American history college class, where I learned that women didn't get the vote until, the 1920s. I was like, wait, what? And I'd never considered voting. I wasn't allowed to vote. My religion didn't participate in politics whatsoever. But then once I left it, I wanted to be involved and to think, wait, I live in a country where I didn't have those rights. And then learning about the ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, that we still as women do not have equal rights in the Constitution here in 2023. And the ERA, wasn't it in was it the 1930s, late 1930s, 1940s, the ERA even started being talked about. And it's almost, close to 100 years later, and it's still not in the Constitution. Like this kind of stuff.
It was introduced July 21st, 1923.
Oh my God. So it is 100 years.
We're coming up on the exact 100-year anniversary.
Okay. That's... I hope everybody's mind just exploded. I really hope you, listener, I hope your mind just exploded with the massive WTF moment here. Okay, so how did you get into this? Obviously, ordained women, women's rights has been very important to you. How did you get on this path of being so passionate about the ERA?
I think it relates to my general overarching passion in life, which is that we don't need to change. These institutions need to change to be more open and inclusive, and they are severely flawed and impossible to succeed until they become more equal. And that's true of a church where I grew up. That's true of the United States of America. It was also founded on a very flawed, intentionally exclusive document written by men who wanted to secure power for themselves and for other men like them. So white landowning men and no one else. This was hardly the bulk of the population, even at the time. There were Native people here. There were millions of enslaved Africans who were brought to this land, and there were women. It turns out women have always existed.
Amazing.
And I know. And they were very intentionally excluded from this founding document. And that's kind of what I try to bring up in the book. I start from before the Constitution was written. So I want people to understand it wasn't just like old-timey times where everyone discriminated against women. So that's just how it was. And it didn't even occur to them to include women. That's not remotely true. There were women at the time, their wives, their contemporaries who were lobbying them and encouraging them to include women. They were starting a whole new country. It could have been anything. And one of the things they modeled the Constitution after was the Great Law of Peace, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy or Iroquois Confederacy. And in the Iroquois Confederacy, women were equals. They shared power with men in their society. So literally the thing they were basing it off of had parity. And they were like, okay, we're just going to copy and paste this. And then we're going to Control F and shift and take out all the references to women. Because a huge bulk of the Great Law of Peace refers to the roles and power of women. And so they had examples all around them. And they had people in their lives encouraging them. Abigail Adams, Mercy Otis Warren, others who were telling them that they wanted to be included. And they made a very intentional decision not to do that. And something very poignant I found when I was studying, for example, anthropologists at the time who studied Native women in culture. And she said that Native women were very worried about becoming U.S. citizens as opposed to citizens of their native tribes because they would lose rights.
Mm-hmm.
So to become an American citizen, even at the time, even in colonial era, was for women to lose rights. And so this was a very intentional system set up from the beginning to exclude us. And we have been working in a formal way for 100 years. So the ERA was first introduced in 1923 by Alice Paul and Crystal Eastman and others. And they began fighting for it to get it in the Constitution. They saw the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote very much as a first step. Crystal Eastman, who I write about in the book, once the 19th Amendment was passed, she gave a speech, and the speech was called "Now at Last We Can Begin." Mm-hmm. Because they saw the 19th Amendment and getting the right to vote as the bare minimum and as a foundational step to actually achieve what they wanted to achieve, which was full equality.
That was one of the parts of the book I made note of, the "Now at last we can begin." The suffragette movement, the fight for that was so passionate and so drawn out. And you even mentioned that some of the men are like, okay, they got it. We're done. We don't have to deal with these women anymore. They got what they wanted. And she's like, no. This is the start. This is the beginning. So for you, your passion about this, your drive, it's led you to do some really amazing, unique things. What this path, this journey, what are a couple of the things that stand out to you where you're like, oh my gosh, I've gotten to take this on and do this and talk to these people. What stands out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like every day is an adventure. Right now, I'm doing one of the things I've had the most honor to do is just working with Congresswoman Cori Bush. Cori Bush is led the fight for Black Lives Matter in Ferguson and is a representative from St. Louis, Missouri. Incredible ordained minister and just powerful person and leader in our country. And I'm working with Cori right now on introducing a bill about the Equal Rights Amendment and starting an ERA caucus in Congress. I'm drafting the submission for us to start the caucus for Cori and working on all kinds of just, amazing leadership emerging on the Equal Rights Amendment. So before, in last Congress, it was Carolyn Maloney and Jackie Spear, both older white women with distinguished careers, but they've been leading the ERA charge for a long time. They're both no longer in Congress. And so this year is like this incredible opportunity for two Black women, both Ayanna Pressley and Cori Bush, are taking over the leadership of the ERA, and just to be able to be a part of that and to help them, take on this challenge that has lasted 100 years and hopefully won't last another 100 years is just a thrill of a lifetime. And one other thing there's so many things, but before the election this past year, I moved to Nevada and I lived in Nevada for several months leading up to the election because they had a state equal rights amendment on the ballot. And in Nevada, the state equal rights amendment isn't just sex, it's race, it's color, creed, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, age, disability, and national origin.
Wow.
So it's very comprehensive and includes, like I mentioned, not only gender identity, but also gender expression. So it's the first time anywhere in a constitution where gender expression is explicitly enshrined in the Constitution. And I got to play a small part in making that happen. We had a monster truck that we wrapped in ERA and we drove it all around Nevada. I drove it in a parade on Nevada Day in Carson City, Nevada. Just all kinds of crazy, crazy adventures in this pursuit of equality. and they won 58.2%. It was,
Wow.
yeah. In an election where they lost, the Democratic governor lost, the Democratic lieutenant governor lost, they almost lost the Senate seat. So these were razor thin elections. In many cases, Democrats lost. Equality was the most popular thing on the ballot.
Wow. That is incredible. Now, wasn't Nevada one of the later ratifiers
Yes.
for the ERA?
Yeah. So Nevada sort of helped resurrect the entire fight for the ERA. In 2017, queer Black preacher Senator Pat Spearman got the ERA ratified in Nevada. And everyone was like, is that still a thing? Like, can we
2017,
still do
hello.
that? Like, isn't that from the 70s? What happened? So Pat really got this whole discussion reignited of is the ERA in the Constitution and how can we make it so? It was ratified in Nevada in 2017, Illinois in 2018, and Virginia in 2020. So she is largely responsible for that. And also she's the one of the chief sponsors of the state ERA. So they had, for the first time ever anywhere in the United States, a female majority legislature.
Wow.
And when they got that female majority legislature, the first thing they did, this is in 2019, and the first thing they did was propose a state ERA.
That's
so
incredible.
when you get women and when you get feminist women in positions of power, this is what can happen.
Mm-hmm. That's incredible. Incredible. It's so exciting. Okay, for people that don't know the history of the ERA, can you give us a super simplified timeline history of the ERA and why these last three were so vital and so important? And then what is next? What are the next steps? What are we hoping to happen?
Okay. We're hopping in an elevator. We only have till the 17th floor. I'm giving you the elevator speech for the ERA. In 1923, it was introduced. In 1972, it was passed in Congress. In 1977, the deadline was looming. They had originally attached a deadline to it. So there were 100,000 people who marched in Washington, D.C. in support of extending the deadline. Unfortunately, the extended deadline expired in 1982, and they fell 3 states short.
3 states. Did everybody hear that? 3 states.
Did you hear that?
We needed 38 to ratify. Am I correct in that? 38.
Yeah, exactly. It's 3/4 of the states. At this point, it's 38 because we don't have DC statehood yet, or Puerto Rico. And so, yes, so it's 38 states. So fast forward, many years have passed, decades, and the Women's March happened, and there's a huge response to the Trump election, and people are like, oh, wait, we need like some permanent protections.
Mm-hmm.
So the reignited interest in the Equal Rights Amendment surfaced. Pat Spearman got it ratified in 2017. That's one of the 3. In Illinois, Juliana Stratton and others in Illinois got it ratified in Illinois in 2018. That's 2 of the 3. And the final state necessary, Virginia, ratified in 2020. So we have now met the threshold of the Equal Rights Amendment and under Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution for amending it. There are some outstanding legal issues, whether or not you can ratify after the deadline and whether or not you can rescind, because 5 states in the 1970s attempted to rescind their initial ratification. Like, it was really popular at the beginning.
Uh-huh.
And then towards the end of the decade, the anti-ERA movement ramped up. So they're like, never mind. We want to undo this.
Which blows my mind that there are women going, no, we don't want to be equal in the Constitution. Why would we want that? Crazy, crazy, crazy to me. But go ahead, go on.
So we've probably reached the end of our elevator ride, but I will say that it's important to keep in mind that, yes, there were women who were the face of the anti-ERA movement, like Phyllis Schlafly and others. But at the end of the day, Phyllis Schlafly ran for office twice and never won.
Mm-hmm.
So Phyllis Schlafly did not vote against the ERA. Men voted against the ERA in every state. Men conspired to kill it. Men in charge of large corporations who were afraid of losing a lot of money heavily lobbied against it. And men in Congress are the ones who decided not to extend the deadline indefinitely or completely eliminate it. They're the ones who decided that they would only do it 3 years because it would not be possible to replace the state senators necessary to get the votes. So yes, women were kind of shoved to the front to put lipstick on this pig of this anti-ERA movement, but they were not the reason that we don't have the ERA. The reason we don't have the ERA are powerful men in positions to vote against it and kill it.
When we say this, there's Now, numbers are not my strong point. I have dyslexia, so I get them all confused. But if I remember correctly, we have about 535 Congress people between Senate and the, uh,
House.
the words are not coming to me right now. And between of those 535, we have somewhere around 143 women, 47 women in.
Yeah. It's 24%, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, which is insane. So trying to get a women's bill across when we do not have equal representation already in the people making the laws, this is an uphill battle. And that's why we need to band together. So this is kind of what I want to wrap up our conversation before we get to the fun part of the interview is, how do we get this to actually happen now? And I know you have some passionate ideas about what women need to do to get our voices heard and make sure that this passes.
Yeah, I mean, we're woefully underrepresented in Congress, and that's for many reasons. Again, this is intentional. There's gerrymandering, there's voter suppression, there's all these different things to make sure that stays the same. And there are lots of reasons why. For example, in other countries, they have gender quotas in their parliamentary systems. And so they're 50-50, like Rwanda and many other countries have gender quotas. We do not. So we are just way behind the game when it comes to gender parity in all of our legislative bodies, except for Nevada. And go Nevada. So yeah, I think, but the one thing we're not underrepresented in is the population. Women are over 50% of the population. And so I think we need to remember that yes, the representation is inadequate, but we are over 50% of the voters. And so we can band together. We can have political power. We can demand change. We can be in control of our governmental systems if we want to, if we organize. We absolutely can. And so I know what it feels like to live in a state where your rights are under attack, where you don't feel like you have any say, where there are super majorities of Republicans in state legislatures and your federal representation. I know what that feels like. I'm from Utah. The worst state in almost every measurable way for women in this country. So I know what it feels like to be intentionally disempowered, and I sympathize with that position. But even in Utah, there are things we can do. So that same year that Pat Spearman in Nevada got the ERA ratified, we had a bill too. I wrote it and it was introduced in the Utah legislature, but it never got across the finish line because there's a supermajority, because the Mormon church is basically operating as a theocracy. And, 98% probably of the legislature, Democrats and Republicans, are Mormon. So we didn't get it across the finish line, but because year after year after year, incredible Utah ERA coalition raised the issue and raised the issue and raised the issue, it gained popularity. And they recently did a poll. I think it was 72% of Utahns support the Equal Rights Amendment. And isn't that crazy?
That's wonderful.
Yeah. And because of that, there were only 4 Republicans who voted in favor of the ERA last year in the House. And one of them was from Utah, John Curtis. Wow. So I say all that to say, it is possible to make gains. It is tiresome, the work, and I get that. I completely sympathize, but it is possible, and we just have to keep this pie in the sky. For me, my entire trajectory has been making very big asks that seem impossible. Whether it's ordain women or whether it's fundamentally alter the U.S. Constitution to be more inclusive, those are big asks.
Yes.
But I think we need to maintain that vision. We need to not only think about fighting attacks we currently face, but also what do we want the future to look like and how do we get there? And then the future that I see and the future I want and the future I'm willing to fight for is there is parity. We have power. We have equally shared responsibility, but we have equal rights. And that's what I'm willing to pour all of my efforts and energy and talent into.
And you have so much talent, and I'm listening to you speak is just so energizing, and lighting a fire in my belly. And I feel like we're going to be talking again in the future because there is so much I want to talk to you about and ask you about. For people right now listening, what is one call to action, one thing that they could do right now to make a difference for equal rights?
I'll say two things. One is on the state level and one is on the federal level. So if you live in a state where the ERA hasn't been ratified, most of those states are in the South. And so if you live in a state where the ERA hasn't been ratified, I would say get connected to a group in your state that's trying to ratify the ERA. They're everywhere. North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, there are groups trying to ratify in your state. And also, if you live in a place where the ERA has been ratified, you can, for a progressive place, for example, California just passed a measure to support the federal ERA. So that's something you can do at the state level. I live in DC. I'm trying to get one passed in the DC City Council. So no matter where you live, you can support ratification of the federal ERA. And then that leads me to the second one, which is both contact President Biden, who can certify and publish the Equal Rights Amendment, and your senators. The senators are going to be having a vote very soon on the Equal Rights Amendment on the floor. So again, I know it's hard, and you may live in a place with two Republican senators who seem anti-equality, but I would contact them and tell them that the ERA is not a partisan issue, that it was always supported by both political parties all the way through ratification. So yeah, I would say contact your local representatives and get involved in a group that's working to ratify the ERA.
That's wonderful. And it's not that hard to do. You can totally do that. Make a call, write a letter. It's important.
Yeah.
It's important. They need to hear from their constituents. And
that's the number one thing I hear when I talk to legislators is I don't hear from constituents about the ERA. We don't get calls. We don't get emails. No one tweets about the ERA. I have to prioritize the issues where I get constituents reaching out to me about it. And if we don't hear from people about the ERA, that is not going to be one of the priorities.
We need to raise our volume. We've got to get out there and have it be heard. Okay. I know our time is coming quickly to an end, and there's some very fun questions I want to get to with you. So we're going to rapid fire them. And then I want you to be able to tell people how to talk to you. So the first question is, do you have a book you're reading right now that you're having fun with, that you're enjoying?
I'm always reading. Yeah, I'm always reading 5 books simultaneously. My partner is always they're always piling up on my bedside table. But I will tell you the book that I just very recently finished that I was absolutely obsessed with and is so good. They're 2 Women Talking by Miriam Toews, which is now also a movie. The book is amazing. And then she also has a book called All My Puny Sorrows. It's such a good book. It's fiction, but it's largely based on her experience. She was raised Mennonite.
Oh.
And so she's a former Mennonite, and her experiences are large. Both of the books are about the Mennonite community. And yeah, they're just some of the best writing I've ever read.
Okay, I'm going to check those out. Are you like me? I am obsessed with books about extreme religion, unorthodox and uneducated and
totally
leaving the witness.
I'm very into them, and I think more people should be because they have a lot to teach us about life and how to fight back against these oppressive institutions.
Yes. Okay. They're making a movie of your life and you get to pick 3 songs for the soundtrack. What would you pick?
Okay. The first one would be Pendulum Swinger by the Indigo Girls. If you haven't heard it.
Indigo Girls.
Yeah, the Indigo Girls are amazing. This is a lesser known song of theirs. But it's explicitly about women church and female ordination. And yeah, they call the people who fight for equality pendulum swingers. So
I love that.
I know, it's such a good song. So definitely Pendulum Swingers. Let's see, what's another song? I would say I'm just obsessed with Dar Williams in general. So I would say there's a song by Dar Williams called The Christians and the Pagans.
Ooh.
It's a very good song.
We,
It's about like
you definitely have a theme. I love this.
yeah, totally. There's well, I mean, it's about my life, so it's gonna have to be on theme.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, The Christians and the Pagans is about a family dinner where half the people are like Christian and half the people are pagans, and like how they get along. It's very, very good.
Fascinating.
It's a hilarious. One of the lines is when Christians and pagans sit down, only pumpkin pies are burning. It's so good. It's like such a good song. And let's see. I guess something like fun. Since let's round it out with Lizzo.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like let's just go with like It's About Damn Time
Mm-hmm.
by Lizzo.
That's like feminist, like let's do it. Yeah.
Fun, rounding it out. Love it.
I love that. I just was on a stage. I moderated a panel, and that was like our walkout song. So totally fun, right? Like it's a panel of women, and yeah. Perfection. Okay, last question is this show's all about radical audacity. And so I always like asking, what is that moment that most people would say, oh, the audacity, how could she? What is that moment recently that you've had where you're really glad you were audacious?
Oh, sheesh. I will say it's so funny because people see me like as a very brash person, but because of my upbringing, it actually is like very costly. Like it costs me a lot to be in conflict with people and like speak up and speak out. I think it's a lot of what we talked about at the beginning, which is like this internalized, oppression, silencing of women, disappearing of women, erasing us from narratives. So it is actually, it is very costly for me to speak up. I do it all the time because it is necessary, but it's not easy. And I think that's a thing people probably wouldn't know about me. But I would say, oh God, I'm just trying to think of like the most recent example where I just had to say something. I feel like this happens every day. I would say, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a quotidian example, but I'll pick just the biggest example in my life, which is when I was faced with excommunication and there were two choices. Like they offered me to repent, which meant to take back what I said and to remain silent and say that I had sinned. That was an option. And that would have gotten me out of all of the punishment and trial and all of that. And I looked down the barrel of that gun and I said, no, I know what is right, and I'm going to tell the truth no matter what you do to me.
That is beautiful. That is as audacious as it gets, is standing true to your inner integrity no matter what it costs you. That's it. That's everything.
It's not easy.
How can people reach out to you? How can they find you?
You can follow me on Twitter, Kate_Kelly_ESQ. That's also my Instagram. I have a podcast. It's called Ordinary Equality.
Which is great, by the way. I love it. I listen to it.
You can listen. There's 4 seasons, so you can binge. I have a co-host. Her name is Jamia Wilson, and she's incredible. And we're looking at doing another season. So subscribe to Ordinary Equality.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This has been a gift to have you on the show. I truly appreciate all of the work that you're doing. It inspires me beyond belief. And I know that the people listening, the women listening especially, are going to say, okay, it's time to rise up and let my voice be heard. So thank you. Thank you for your rally cry. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. If women like us can do it, anyone can do it.
Yes. We know how important it is. We've been oppressed, deeply oppressed. We know how important it is. So thank you.
It's possible.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
Are you as fired up after this episode as I am? Oh my goodness, this conversation with Kate left me so emotional. You can't see me, but my neck is bright red and blotchy from just the emotions running through me through this conversation of being able to talk to somebody that understands what my childhood was like and what it's been like leaving my religion. Now, I was not raised Mormon, but there are so many similarities between our, what she called high demand religions, which is her very nice way of putting a cult. I love how she talked about the loss, the grief, the mourning that goes with leaving a religion like this. And then also this desire to make things right. And she has this burning, burning, burning desire. She asked the question of herself, what do I want the future to look like? And how do I get there? And that's truly a call to action for all of us, I think, right? Like, what do we want the future to look like? And how do we get there? Are we willing to do the hard work to get there? Are we willing to stand up and speak out and, be audacious and have people say, whoa, how can she say that? If we want lasting change, then we need to do that. I also love how Kate said, women do not need to change. It's the institutions that need to change. And she said this very early on in our conversation. And I kept going back to that idea that it's the institutions that need to change, not us. And I do believe that as women, especially women that were really socialized and raised to be nice girls and raised to think that the things that we want and desire are wrong, or that we are too much, that we are too loud, we are too whatever, we have this feeling inside us that somehow we need to change. We need to be more like men. We need to, lean in. We need to, whatever these messages are, where we're told to be less emotional and more rational and all of this stuff and deny our womanhood. And I just loved how she said, women do not need to change. So, in the words of Alice Paul, who was pivotal in getting women's right to vote 100 years ago, and in starting the ERA, getting that amendment written, Alice Paul said, now at last we can begin. And so, my friends listening, now at last we can begin. What can you do to make sure that all future generations of women have equal rights here in the United States of America, that we have constitutionally protected equal rights? We are in a time when our rights are being stripped away everywhere we turn and everywhere we look. The dismantling of Roe v. Wade is a perfect example of that. It is time to stand up and make sure we are constitutionally protected. How are you going to do that? What are you going to do? This is your call to action. I always say, raise the volume of your voice. I am listening. So how are you going to do that? I want to hear from you. Reach out to me. If you know of people doing amazing work, let me know who they are. I want to find these people and highlight these people. If you're involved in some incredible organizations, will you please reach out to me and let me know what organizations that you are a part of that are doing wonderful work in this area? I really, really want to hear about it. I really want to learn about it and highlight the people doing this work. If this episode had you feeling emotional, had you feeling, oh my goodness, my mind is blown, if you shouted out WTF at any moment in this episode, will you please share this episode with somebody else who you know needs to share this message, needs to hear this message? You are the way this message will get out there by you sharing. Women are very social creatures. And the number one way we hear about a new podcast, a new book we need to read, a new song we need to listen to is from recommendations from friends and family. So if you would share this episode with somebody, I know you'll make a difference. It will really help get this message out. Thank you so much for listening today. Remember to raise the volume of your voice. I'm listening.